Right here we're with Sebastian, the developer of MobiFlight, and we're going to go over 5 tips that you can use in MobiFlight that are a little bit more advanced. We'll start off with preconditions. So would you like to explain preconditions?
All right, yeah, preconditions, that's a really good thing to know and how they work. And they're really extremely handy when you're thinking about things that display values, for example, that depend on other things. So in this example, we're looking at the comm radio frequency. And as you can see, I'm right now inside of the cockpit, and I have turned off my master battery switch and also my avionics switch in this Cessna 152. And you can see that the entire avionics stack is turned off. It's dark. If you just go and configure MobiFlight to use and display the values of COM1, you will probably have encountered the problem that the displays are lit on your 7-segment display, even though they're not actually lit here in the cockpit. So the preconditions help solve this. So you can actually, for this case, I created 2. First of all, I read out the master battery switch and avionics switch value, and I'm gonna run this here. So you immediately see currently those 2 values are set to 0. And you can also see that there's this little identifier in the beginning of my first configuration, which says COM1 active on. And this means that something here, the precondition is not satisfied, and that's why this configuration will be not evaluated by MobiFlight. So basically MobiFlight is going to skip this row, and you see that there's almost a copy, a duplicate of the very same configuration, and we do not have this exclamation mark in the front. So you can also see that the output value is totally blank. So it's reading the FSUIPC value from the COM radio, but it doesn't output anything, but that's exactly what we want. So how did we achieve this? Let's see what happens when I turn on my alternator and master avionics switch. So now the exclamation mark went away, and MobiFlight now is actually really paying attention to this configuration. The FSUIPC part is simply using the precondition that comes with MobiFlight. The display part just uses standard configuration for my 7-segment display that I have connected to my MobiFlight board. But here comes the interesting part. On the precondition tab, we have 2 conditions that have to be fulfilled so that this configuration is going to be evaluated. The first one is master battery switch has to be 1, and the second is the avionics switch has to be on. So we're seeing that we're referencing another config line here and also there, and then you can choose whatever you want, whether it's equal or greater equal or not equal, and then you can put whatever number makes sense for this particular offset there. You can also add more of these by using the right mouse button, and then this context menu is going to pop up, and you can say add precondition, and then we could come up with a third one, but we don't have any. The RCase pin is actually something from, it's kind of a legacy thing. It should probably not be displayed if you're working with a MobiFlight board. So for MobiFlight, only config items really make sense. So I apologize, it's kind of confusing because it would only work if you have an RCase module connected to your computer or to MobiFlight. So we can also remove the precondition, and this was now saying, okay, if both are on, then we want to display a value. And if both are off, that's the second precondition. That's the precondition for the second row. Then just always simply put out blanks. Yeah. And whenever I toggle my switches here, you will see that the indicator in the front will also change, and based on the switch's position, or better said, the FSUIPC value from these 2 offsets, then your display is going to show values or it's not going to show any values. That's good to know about preconditions. They're really handy.
Excellent. Thank you so much for explaining that. Next off, we're going to go with some of the expression syntax. If you have the raw data from FSUIPC, sometimes the numbers won't necessarily line up, so you'll have to apply a transformation or a comparison to get them to line up.
You can find in the documentation on MobiFlight on the website, there is, if you go to the software part, and then you can scroll all the way down, there is expression engine explained with a little bit more details. And at the very bottom, there is also a link that takes you to a GitHub project, which is actually the one that I'm using for MobiFlight as a library, so that I do not have to implement everything from scratch over again. And then if you go to this functions, you will see that they're aside, additionally to the basic arithmetic things like plus and minus and division and multiplication, you also have really some more advanced possibilities here with using these functions. And then if you go to the operators, there will be an explanation for all the different things that you can do, like add, subtract, multiply. You can also do modulo and these kind of things. So it's really, really powerful and very, very flexible. And if we just take the example again that we had with the COM1 preset, like here's a very simple example of what the transformation does. If we take a look at the compare tab, here we can see that the expression syntax is also applied, because it's going to substitute the dollar symbol and then it's going to add 10,000 to it. So let us take a look at the example from earlier with the COM value. FSUIPC does not provide us the complete frequency information. It just gives us the last 4 digits on the old FSUIPC offset, which we're using here. There's actually a new one that you should check out that contains all the entire value correctly. But in the old offset, you will have this shorter version, and the leading one, we can achieve this by adding 10,000 to the value that we're reading of FSUIPC. So the expression syntax can be applied in different places. As you can see, we're doing it here on the compare tab, and you can also use it in the transform tab, and you can actually also use it here in these in this value field. And if you think about the inputs, there's also somewhere here, like on inputs, where you can set a value. I just have to configure that real quick just so that something shows. Here in this value field, you can also use the expression syntax. Actually, instead of doing it this way, where we do it on the comparison tab, we could move this entire thing to a transform field. It would also have the same result. So instead of this, we could actually we don't actually need this. Yeah, that's actually easier, and you can see it's still coming up with the same value. So it's pretty flexible. You can use the expression syntax in different parts of MobiFlight, and it's really, really helpful for many cases.
Absolutely. Next, let's go into configuration ref. Do you want to give some insight on that?
Yeah, sure. Config references is a fairly new feature. It has been introduced with the LCD displays when I started to support LCD displays, because one of the main use cases is really that you want to output more than just one value on your LCD display, especially if you have the bigger ones that come with 4 lines and 20 columns. So they really provide a lot of space, and so I thought about a solution for this, and this was config references. I will just do a dummy thing here just so that for illustration, that's actually going to be helpful. So display, radio, and we have an LCD display. And then you can see that it comes up with this stuff, and it says use the dollar for any digit that shall display the current value that we have, that we're reading off our FSUIPC offset here. Or you can also display other config values by using a placeholder. So this is on this page where we can now say, oh, you know what? I want to display the master battery switch information, and I want to do so by using the hashtag thing. And I want to display the avionics switch information by using the asterisk. So I can also choose what kind of placeholder I want to have or to use. So I can clear this all out, and then I can save, I can copy it from here, and then I go there and I can use these symbols, and they will be really replaced by the actual value that the configuration is providing to MobiFlight. So that's really, really nice. And the config references, you can have up to 6. So that means you could potentially display 7 values here. The value that comes from this configuration plus 6, and we do not have more than 6 right now here, more than 4 right now here, because we only have 4 configuration entries in total. So if I were to add a new one here, test one, where I say, okay, this is going to be the autopilot airspeed value that I want to display, great. Next time I go on display, it's going to give me like 5. Right? Because that makes sense. I can use 5 different ones. So I can choose test, which was the AP speed value, and it's going to use the question mark. So like this. All right. Yeah, that's how the config references work. I hope that makes sense.
The fourth tip is FSUIPC settings. So the float, integer, and string values. So, would you like to explain this, Sebastian?
Oh, sure, yeah. FSUIPC offset settings. That's a good thing to understand, because oftentimes you get to the point where you won't find a preset that for the value or for the whatever in your cockpit that you're looking for. And it's basically, there's so many FSUIPC offset, and we already decided to just use a fraction of these. And I think it's still, I have to lie, I think it's 400 and something, but I might be wrong. But anyways, it's a long list, but you will get to the point sooner or later when you have a more advanced setup that you do not find your FSUIPC offset here. And this is then the moment when you get to the base settings, and you have to understand what the base settings are referring to and what they mean. But it should actually be like super straightforward, because the names and everything, all these information you will find in the FSUIPC offset documentation. Now you might wonder, where do I find the FSUIPC offset documentation? I've never seen one. And then, well, that's actually pretty easy. When you go to your file explorer, to the installation directory where you have your FSUIPC installed. So for Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, this is going to be an extra folder, as it is for me here. In the older versions, or for prepared, you will go to the modules folder, and then there's going to be this folder, and then you will see this PDF file where it says FSUIPC 5 offsets status. And here you can then just, Captain Bob, say something like name an offset that we should look up.
Let's go with left gear in travel.
Okay.
Or up.
All right, left gear. So this should be, oops. Yeah. Like I'll just, we'll see if I can find anything about gear. Okay, so this gear is retractable. There, gear position. Yeah, that's nose, right, and left. So the first column is going to be the address. So this is then something that you would copy here in this field. Boom. So this is going to be used as the offset address. And then it's asking for the value type, and the value type, let me see, the value type, well, if it would call it out if it was not an integer. So typically when you have just integer numbers, like whole numbers, like this one here, going from 0 to 16,383, it's fair to assume that it's going to be an int. Float are actually really rare, and string are also rare. So string could be the current aircraft that you loaded, or the current flight plan name, or whatever, I believe. And float is some newer offsets, they would use float values. So anyway, if it doesn't have a decimal point, then you can pretty much go with int. And then size in bytes, this is also here, the second column, 4. In this case, this would be 4. And then it asks about a mask value. So this is also something where you typically do not have to do anything with. There's some offsets like the lights, yeah, that will call out in the documentation that a certain byte is referring to a certain light, like the beacon light or the landing lights. They're coded here as positions which you can mask out, and then you will be able to actually interpret the right value. And BCD mode, there's also some, we look for BCD, the COM2 frequency, for example, here it specifically says it's in BCD format. So this is then the moment where you would have to check this box and see, okay, BCD mode, that's what I want. So this is all about the base settings. Sooner or later you will get to the point, and it's pretty straightforward with the documentation to transfer anything that is documented in here, any offset, and put the right values in the right spot, and then it should actually work. Does that make sense, Captain Bob?
It does. Thank you so much for explaining that. And another thing you'll want to keep in mind is that this document, the offset status document, also contains a lot of the transformations, so you can get a kind of overview of what's happening.
Yeah, that's a pretty good comment there. Like for example, heading. I believe heading. Oh yeah, like here for example, magnetic variation, where it then says if you want to convert this into degrees, then you have to multiply this value that you read from the offset by 360 and divide it by 65,536. And this will actually then give you a degree reading. Or here, true airspeed. Yeah, it's also saying that you have to multiply it by 128. And that's when you would use the transform field together with the expression syntax that we just talked earlier about.
Excellent.'t you so much for explaining that. Another thing you can do, tip number 5, is that you can set MobiFlight to give a keyboard output, more or less, and you can kind of use this when testing inputs. So if you have your MobiFlight running, you can go over to the Input tab, and then under Edit, you can, on press, you can set this either to an FSUIPC value, an event ID, a PMDG event ID, a key, and there's a whole lot of other things you can set this to. So for now we're going to go to key, and then you can set this to a key combination or a key press. So you could use H, for example, and then whenever you have this going, it's in offline mode. You don't have to have this running, do you, for offline mode to work?
So if you actually want to try it, then you would have to, if you don't want to have your flight simulator running, then you have to put it into offline mode. Because only if MobiFlight is running, then you can test the inputs. That's a little bit of like we have the test function for the outputs, but we do not have a test function for the inputs. So you have to come up with this workaround to put it into offline mode. And with the keyboards, like your idea is great, and then you try it with the keyboards. Open up a notepad, right? And then you can see at least that your encoder is working as it's supposed to work, or your button or your switch.
So this is super helpful if you ever want to test your inputs. Another thing you can do is you can enable logging. That's under settings, logging, and then set it to debug. And then you can see everything that happens on your simulator. So when you press run, you'll see whenever buttons are pressed. This is also good for debugging errors and seeing any errors that happen.
Yeah, that's true. That's also a great idea. Just use the debug mode in offline mode together with the debug mode set to debug. Then you will also see the events coming in from your switches. It's a great way to just verify that your wiring and everything is working correctly.
The sixth function is the donation feature. If you enjoy this software and would like to support it, there's a donate feature right next to auto run that you can use to help keep MobiFlight running and developing. Thank you so much, Sebastian, for coming out, taking the time to do this video.
Yeah, man, thanks, Captain Bob, for having me. You're a great guy. I really like your videos. Good luck with everything. Good luck with your flight simulator that you're building and with your YouTube channel. Yeah, looking forward to doing another one.
If you liked this kind of collaboration, make sure to check out MobiFlight's YouTube channel in the link below. It shows the release videos and it explains some of the new features. You can also join the MobiFlight Discord in the link below, as well as my Discord. And if you like this video, feel free to like, share, subscribe, and comment, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one.